and welcome to another episode of Gossip Finance, where I'm your host, Lacey Singer.
And I'm Duncan Sandlin. How's everybody today? How are you, Lace?
I'm excellent. I can't wait to talk about the news. My goodness, there was so much craziness this past week.
Oh my gosh. Scandal, scandal, scandal. That's all we got for you for the news.
All right. So, which scandal we got first, Duncan? Let's launch right into it.
Let's start with a fun one. Let's start with George Santos. So George Santos is an elected representative in New York, and he got elected basically because the Republicans didn't check on him, and the Democrats really dropped the ball because they should have had him pegged to the wire. So he basically lied about everything. He lied about where he went to school, where he's from. There's even questions about whether George Santos is his real name. Right? But
I mean, seriously, why are you going to lie about this stuff? It is the stupidest stuff to lie about, and some of the easiest stuff to check up on if people actually do. Like, if people actually start Googling you,
yeah,
it really becomes easy in this day and age to check on that nature of stuff.
But that's the point, is the Democrats should have checked up on him before he got elected. They just figured it's a Republican district, he's a Republican, we're not going to win. So they just kind of threw their hands up, and then a guy gets elected, and all these journalists are looking at him going, who is this guy? And they find out everything he said was bullshit. And the Republican Party is now really embarrassed, but they can't afford to get rid of him because they have such a narrow lead in the House. If they lose a single vote, it's really harmful to them. So they can't get rid of him, and he doesn't want to leave, right? And all these things came out. So he said he went to Baruch College, and he was one of the players on the star volleyball team, and he never went to Baruch College. Right, so that was a weird one. He said he worked for...
And if you're lying about your school...
Why not Cambridge? Or I went to Paris or something.
Listen, I went to a CUNY school to get my master's degree, and I'm proud of my education. But if I'm literally going to invent where I went...
Right.
I'm going to make it somewhere hoity-toity sounding,
Yeah. I went to Georgetown.
Right.
I graduated with honors.
Right.
Said he worked
I went to Columbia.
Yeah, he said he worked for Goldman Sachs. Goldman Sachs, never heard of him. And my favorite, just to give you a sense of who this guy is, so there was a story where he, I guess, was running a charity where he was helping homeless people with their pets. And so this guy had his dog who had some sort of cancer or whatnot, and it was going to take $4,000 or $5,000 to treat the dog, right? So George Santos met up with the guy, started a GoFundMe page, raised the money, and then kept it. And the guy's dog died of cancer. When it could have been,
so
it easily
also
could.
Has his very own dog cancer scam.
Well, he had for a while, yeah.
Awesome.
Yeah, he's had a bunch of them. He's a good little con artist running around. So anyway, he just got indicted, and we're going to watch a little bit of that because it's not shocking.
They're going to turn now to Republican Congressman George Santos, who is going back to Capitol Hill, back to Washington, after pleading not guilty to a 13-count felony indictment in New York. Federal charges include fraud, money laundering, all of it connected to the campaign for his seat on New York's Long Island. And Caitlin Huey-Burns is with us now after talking with Santos in quite the scrum outside the courthouse yesterday.
It was quite an event. Good morning, Tony, and good morning to everyone. Well, George Santos was released on $500,000 bond, and he says he's heading back to Washington, but he'll be returning with some diminished support. Last night, House Speaker Kevin McCarthy said he would not back Santos's bid for re-election.
So 13 felony counts of fraud. 13. At least we're not skimping.
I mean, I guess if you're gonna do it, commit to it. I don't even know what to say about that.
Yeah. Go big or go home, I guess, right?
That's why I was thinking go big or go home, and then I was trying to process in my brain if go big or go home makes sense here. I don't even know. The whole thing is so weird.
Well, a couple of a lot of it's campaign finance, fraud, shit like that, which are all federal crimes. My favorite one, though, in there is this. is he was working for some financial firm. They didn't specify which firm, but it's probably this one firm called Harbor something that went out of business. That was basically a Ponzi scheme, and he was working for them. So he was working for what is essentially a Ponzi scheme, and he was claiming he was making whatever $100,000+ a year doing that. While he was working there, he claimed he was unemployed and was collecting unemployment insurance every month. So it's unemployment insurance fraud because he's claiming that he's not working to collect unemployment insurance. If he collects whatever $30,000 in unemployment insurance while he's working.
This is so stupid. I cannot even tell you how stupid this is.
All right. So he does his little Trump defense where he calls it a witch hunt. Let's see if they play that real quick. But it's just fucking amazing.
New York Congressman George Santos left a Long Island courtroom Wednesday vowing to fight the federal charges against him and taking a page from former President Trump's legal playbook.
I'm going to fight the witch hunt. I'm going to take care of clearing my name, and I look forward to doing that.
Santos pleaded not guilty to financial charges, including fraud, money laundering, and lying on his disclosure forms during his 2022 campaign.
What? He lied? He lied, Lacey. Tell me it ain't
On the disclosure form.
Tell me it's not true. George Santos lied. I can't believe it. That guy is the beacon of truth.
Oh my God, I can't even.
Well, he's in deep shit. Well, that's the thing too is he pleads not guilty, right? Which is okay. I feel bad for his attorney. I mean, I don't in the sense that his attorney took the case, but it's like, it's one of those things where it's like, what do you do? How do you defend that? You're just going to get up there and like, well, George, you clearly said this on the disclosure form. It's in writing. You signed it, and it's not true. What's my defense going to be? Right? You clearly were taking unemployment checks and cashing them at your bank. Right? While you were employed. How do I defend that?
Yeah, like, what do you even say to that? Like,
you're a chronic liar, dude. You leave
I don't know, my client's an idiot. Like,
it's like back when I was a cop. It's one of these where it's like, this criminal's so stupid he leaves a trail like a fucking slug. Like, I can't follow him. It's trail of slime. Yes, I know where he went.
oh my goodness.
Oh, man. So he's basically cooked. I mean, I don't know how he gets out of this. But yeah, he's gonna. I guess he's gonna try to go to court and fight it. He's not gonna step down. The Republicans aren't gonna make him step down, which is amazing because they need the vote, right? Oh man, but we'll see. We'll see what happens. But I think he's cooked. I don't know what he's gonna do now. So we'll skip to our next one. Donald J. Trump.
Well, since he took one right out of his playbook, we might as well jump over to him, right?
Yep. Donald John Trump was found guilty last week in the civil case of defamation.
Wait a minute, another beacon of truth?
Yes, a man who never lies. And he's still saying it's a witch hunt and they're coming. Anyway, he was found guilty. This was a civil case, so essentially what happened was this woman, E. Jean Carroll, claimed that he raped her years ago. Just give you some of the background on why this case got fucked up. So it got dragged out for a long time, partly because he was president, and it's difficult to bring a case against a sitting president, right? Partly because they don't really have a Fifth Amendment right when you're in that office. So finally got it out, finally got the case going, finally got to court. Her attorneys called 10 witnesses who, all confirmed her story for the most part. And his attorneys for the defense called 0 witnesses and didn't present anything for a case because there was nothing to present. And Donald Trump didn't show up, didn't testify, said he was going to show up and testify. The judge said, okay, well, you got to get this motion in by the Sunday before we go to deliberation. Didn't get the motion in. Trump was in Ireland golfing the whole time, right? Jury deliberated for 3 hours. That's nothing. Came back and said, look, we're going to say, yeah, defamation. He committed that and definitely sexually abused her. We're like, we can't say he raped her because there's not enough evidence to say that he actually raped her. So he got tagged with defamation, sexual abuse, and now he owes her $5 million, which is about what she asked for.
Good for her.
Well, finally, after how many
Right.
decades? Yeah, and the thing about he got kind of semi-lucky and semi-unlucky on this was he tried to do this thing, which I thought was really funny. So they asked for DNA, because she had DNA on her dress that she'd saved, right? So they asked him for a DNA sample. He refused to give it, right? Finally, when the trial was coming through, said, okay, fine, we'll give you a DNA sample, but we want the actual, whatever it is, the breakdown that they give you when they do the DNA. I forget what that sheet is called, the VU whatever chart. We want that information on the DNA from her dress before we give you a sample. Well, what that means is, so I'm going to give you the DNA.
That means we can make sure we get some different DNA.
Well, no, or that means he's going to sit there and go, okay, it's a match for my DNA, so I'm not going to give you a sample. Or it's not a match for my DNA, so yeah, I'm definitely going to give you a sample. But the court doesn't work that way. It's like, no, we're not going to give you the option of deciding whether the evidence is good or bad. But he refused to give a sample, tried to do it later. The judge threw it out. And it kind of lucked out because had they had the sample, she probably would have got tagged with rape. But yeah, I thought that was fun. I don't know why they couldn't just subpoena and force him to give a sample. But
I was gonna say I'm kind of surprised that they didn't.
yeah, so was I. I don't know what the problem was, but anyway, so let's look at the Trump deal because did not go well for him.
Former President Trump is vowing to appeal the verdict in writer E. Jean Carroll's civil case against him.
A continuation of the greatest witch hunt of all time. Absolutely a shame.
That's the former president posting a video on his Truth Social site overnight. A jury found him liable for sexual battery and defamation against Carroll, although it did not find he raped her as she claimed.
So, just what we said. Once again, the witch hunt thing, it's one of those things where it's like, for witch hunts, we're finding a lot of fucking witches, aren't we? Usually at a witch hunt, you don't find the witch.
Right. Like, you actually know how that generally works? No?
Oh, so there's so much about this, it's terrible. So there's this is going on. His one sort of argument was he didn't rape her. He never met her, never seen her before, and what was it? She was too ugly for him to rape. That was kind of his spiel. And he even did a town hall later this week. He did a town hall where he repeated that. And his Trump supporters were all laughing at it while he's joking about this thing he just got tagged for sexual abuse. And they're all laughing like, oh yeah, it's a joke. But anyway, his defense, not attracted to her, never met her. Here's a clip from his deposition. He did a video deposition. He didn't appear in court. The video deposition where they show him a picture with him and her, and he mistakes her for somebody else. It's pretty funny.
You know who the woman? Let's say I don't know who. It's Marla.
You're saying Marla's in this photo?
That's Marla. Yeah, it's my wife.
Which one are you pointing to? No.
Here. Oh,
The person you just pointed to was
I
E.J.
see.
Carroll.
Who is that?
And the woman on the right is your then wife.
I don't know.
Mother?
This was the picture. I assume that's John Johnson. Is that Carol? Because it's very blurry. I don't even know who that is.
So, yep, you did know her. And you
Wow.
mistook her
So
for your second
He now
wife.
also called his ex-wife too ugly, whom he married
Well,
and procreated with.
Furthermore, his second wife, Marla Maples, was a model. So he can't. So if he's confusing E.G. and Carol with her, then it's like, yeah, you basically just condemned yourself, bro. Oh, the picture's blurry. It's too blurry. It wasn't. I wish I had the picture, but it wasn't.
Wow.
I could tell who it was, and I've never met him.
Dumb.
All right, so I want to get. These are the Donald Trump, the current cases, just to keep track. This is New York Magazine, so just so we're all keeping track together. Okay,
All right.
So this one's done. These are the current ones. This isn't all of them. These are just the current ones. So the Stormy Daniels hush money. That's 30 something counts.
Yep.
Right. 34 felony counts. Falsifying business records. All right. So that's going on. Election tampering in Georgia. That's still going on. Looks like, in fact, Fannie Willis here she's basically indicated she's going to indict him this summer on that. And they've got that on tape, right? You remember the famous tape of him? I just need 170 something votes. Right? So they've got that. Then there's the DOJ Special Counsel Jack Smith for the classified documents he stole at Mar-a-Lago. That case is blown up because apparently somebody who was in his inner circle actually is a witness that Trump physically took documents himself, which makes it, he can't say that, oh, it was an accident or somebody took it or it wasn't me. They have physical proof that he actually took them or took documents. So now that's going to heat up sometime either later this summer or fall. Plus, there's the January 6th election aftermath, and that's a criminal case, and that's of sedition, right? But we'll see when that happens. And then the E.G. and Carroll case just got wrapped up, right? And then he's still up for business fraud in New York. And those are the current ones.
Oh my.
I swear to God, going forward, every kid who has to do a high school project on a president, they're going to be like, I don't want Taft. Taft is boring. I want the business guy that committed the fraud.
I want the business guy that said all those nasty things about women and still got elected.
Right. I want the business guy that didn't do anything about a pandemic and he got millions of people killed. That guy. Oh, man. Zachary Taylor sucks. Speaking of other people you might want to do a high school project on.
Nice segue.
Thank you. Supreme Court Justice Clarence Thomas. Oh, man. He has been in a hot
mess.
So he was taking money for the last decade plus from this billionaire, Republican billionaire, who's a big donor named Crow, and they were taking vacations. And then it turned out Crow bought Thomas's mother's house, and so Clarence Thomas's mother is living in this guy's house that he owns now, and he's made improvements on and all this stuff. Then it turns out that Thomas was not just hanging out with this guy on vacation, but hanging out with conservative lawyers who actually try cases in the Supreme Court. and a firm that actually that's what their business is they try conservative cases in Supreme Court. And so he's hanging out with these guys in private, which is ex parte communication with a judge, which is not legal in most places. But now there's one more thing to add to that pile of dirt that he's been doing. And we're going to go with Anna Kasparian here and the Young Turks. She's going to clue us in.
The Clarence Thomas corruption scandal is the story that just never ends. It's the gift that keeps on giving. It turns out that Justice Thomas reversed one of his positions on one of the country's most significant regulatory decisions after his wife Ginny allegedly accepted secret payments from conservative donors, and while he himself was receiving extravagant gifts and luxury vacations from billionaire Harlan Crow. Now, to understand how corruption is at play here, we need context on this legal doctrine in question, which is known as the Chevron doctrine. According to the lever, the so-called Chevron deference doctrine stipulates that the executive branch, not the federal courts, has the power to interpret laws passed by Congress in certain circumstances. Conservatives for years have fought to overturn the doctrine, a move that would empower legal challenges to federal agency regulations on everything from climate policy to workplace safety to overtime pay. So it was the
So I want to go through that real quick because this is pretty important. So now we can get to some financial news here on this, because the Chevron doctrine, if you're a business owner, this is important, and it's one of those things where, as a business owner, you can sit there and go, well, I don't really like it because I have to go through all these regulations, right? Are you okay there? Had some feedback there. Anyway, so the Chevron doctrine works like this because it had to do something with the Chevron Corporation. But it says basically the federal agencies can adjudicate specifics on certain regulatory policy. Because a lot of times Congress, when they pass them, it's vague, right?
Right.
So I'll give you a great example. So the EPA, the Environmental Protection Agency, was founded by Richard Nixon, oddly enough. But the reason they did it was because the Cuyahoga River in Cleveland, Ohio, had literally caught fire several times because of all the this is back in the 70s, because of all the pollutants. So basically the EPA's doctrine was, well, to clean up to clean up the rivers and make it safe and all that stuff. Well, to do that, they had to regulate, well, you can't dump these types of pollutants in the river or do these types of things anymore. You have to go through these procedures to get rid of them. Well, then you have to get to the court and go, well, wait a minute, though. Congress didn't say that they could tell us to do all this. It just said they had to clean up the river. But what they found later on under the Chevron doctrine was, well, yeah, but we're going to give the EPA deference and say, look, they get to determine how exactly they're going to do that. And so they can specify regulations. Like, no, you can't just dump gasoline in the river. You have to put it in barrels and you have to take it to a specific site or whatever, right? So that's just an example of the Chevron doctrine. Now, if you're a business, that costs you a lot of money. It's cheaper for me to just dump my pollutants in the Cuyahoga River and go, whoops, it caught fire. Oh, well, not my problem. I'm upstream.
Oh, darn.
Right. But where it's, harming people in the city and it's deadly. It's like, yeah. So now the EPA comes in and says, hey, Duncan, you can't just dump that anymore. You got to put it in sealable barrels and you have to have it shipped and transported safely to a specific site to decompose or whatever. And that has to be overseen by these rules and regulations so it doesn't get into topsoil and other. I mean, now all of a sudden I'm spending all this money to get rid of this shit. As where before I could just pour it in the river. So you can see where businesses are sitting there going, well, yeah, we'd like to get rid of the Chevron doctrine, especially big corporations, because that'll save us a ton of money. We won't have to comply with all this shit all the time. So like another big one, OSHA is the safety organization for worker safety. Okay, well, that means I've got to provide safety harnesses and back braces and I have to allow things like bathroom breaks and,
Oh man.
shit like that. Yeah. And I've got to, and then you've got other regulations. Well, you have to give, worker a 10-minute break every 2 hours. And you got to give them a lunch if they work an 8-hour shift for at least a half hour. Right. It's like, I would like to not have to follow those regulations. Right. I would like not to have to not pay overtime.
Right.
So that's what they're talking about here. So we're going to watch a little bit more of this, but essentially what happened was he took money, his wife took money, and then he flipped his position right after his wife took money. And that's what this whole scandal is really about.
Result of the 1984 Supreme Court case, Chevron USA v. Natural Resources Defense Council, which was brought by environmental advocates to challenge Reagan's weakening of air pollution regulations. The Supreme Court deferred to the EPA and its interpretation of the Clean Air Act, which at the time was seen as a win for the polluters. But it was also a win for the administrative state or federal government agencies, which is why conservatives hated it. Now, Thomas wrote a landmark Supreme Court opinion upholding the doctrine in 2005, but began questioning it a decade later before eventually renouncing his past opinion in 2020 and claiming that the doctrine itself might be unconstitutional. Now Thomas could help overturn the doctrine in a new case the High Court just agreed to hear next term. And what do you know? Groups within the conservative legal movement, which includes right-wing donors Leonard Leo and Harlan Crow, have orchestrated an effort in recent years to overturn the decision. What a shocker. They hate that the doctrine empowers federal agencies like the EPA or even the Education Department to interpret and implement statutes. Maybe Claire.
So that's the big kicker, right? That's happening with that scandal now is the guy who's been giving Thomas this money for years for vacations and his mom's house and giving his wife, kickbacks and all this stuff is one of the guys bringing the case to overturn the Chevron doctrine. And now we're supposed to trust that Clarence Thomas is not going to give a biased opinion. He should recuse himself now, but he's not gonna. So.
Yeah, it's crazy.
I know, it's fucking insane, but the scandals keep getting worse and worse with him, man.
Man, he just needs to step down. I mean, he's such an embarrassment to himself.
Well, the whole court.
How could he literally sit there and keep adjudicating things, knowing everyone's looking at him like he's a total fraud?
Oh, I mean, I've seen him. I saw him speak live once, and he's just out there as a person. And honestly, him, Alito. I'm confident Alito was the guy that leaked the Dobbs decision that overturned Roe v. Wade. But they dropped that whole case. Chief Justice Roberts isn't even looking for who leaked it, probably because he knows.
Right.
I mean, so the whole court now is just tainted. And then you look at most Americans don't trust the court anymore. Kind of hard to blame them. But it's like these things affect us individually, but it affects business. It affects your daily lives. I mean,
I bet Ruth Bader Ginsburg is turning over in her grave, going.
Part of this is her fault. She should have retired sooner. I mean, they tried to get her to retire several times and she wouldn't do it. And it's like, okay, and now you died under Trump and now we got Amy Coney Barrett. Basically we got one of the Stepford wives. You got a woman who does not believe in women's rights. So yeah.
That's a tough pill to swallow, man.
Well, it's like RBG, you should have retired. You should have retired under Obama. he asked you many times, because then he could have picked somebody. But then even he had the problem with Merrick Garland, so that was all a nightmare. Anyway, so that was the news for today. Just lots and lots of conservative scandals going on. I mean, and then I guess there's Hunter Biden's laptop, which nothing came out of. So that's the big Biden scandal that never happened. But yeah, so that's all that. So let's go into some videos. Let's do I got some Ramsey stuff today. I know we do Ramsey a lot, but I want to talk about this again. Remember the deal with we have kind of a labor shortage right now in the country, and part of it is they're talking about this 7 million men that aren't working or looking for work, right? I want to go over this again because this is a really interesting conservative position they take on it, and it's wrong because there is an actual right answer to this question about why is this happening and what can we do about it. But they don't ever want to address it. I want to go through it real quick because it just amuses me that they're still on this after years, and they should know better by now. So we're going to watch this Mike Rowe and Dave Ramsey whining about men not wanting to work.
One of my favorite podcasts I listen to is a guy who's become a friend, Mike Rowe. He let me come on the podcast one time. The ratings went down dramatically. He hasn't spoken to me since. But we did a long form with him, and America's famous dirty jobs guy. And he and I have done several things together since he spoke here at Entree Leadership in 2020, in the middle of crazy land at the time. And we've been having this conversation lately, off and on, from 2 or 3 different angles about the labor crisis in America. So I wanted to have Mike on and talk about it for just a few minutes. Welcome back, my friend.
Good to see you, Dave. And boy, 2020, that was a time. I was so grateful you invited me to that thing because it was the first time I felt like, okay, the world's not completely crap the bed. Somebody sensible is still living life. And it was good to be there with you and the whole gang.
Well, and I mean, just let's talk about the truth of it is you've never gotten as much hate mail as you got from doing that event. So it was awesome. I mean, you pissed off everybody by being here because I was in the middle of pissing off the entire world doing the thing. It was pretty crazy. So it was fun though. Hey, why not? Why not? We got to do it.
Okay. That's, they're taking forever here. The 2 things, the Entree Leadership deal is one of their big, seminar events they do. Tickets run
right. It's a weekend seminar, sort of something.
Yeah, tickets per person run one between $3,000 to $5,000, and so you go there to get basically told you need to save money after you spent $3,000 to $5,000. Plus, you had to probably fly there and get a hotel and all that shit. So that's stupid. The other thing about it is they're talking about they did it in 2020. Hey, remember what was going on in 2020? There was a freaking pandemic, and there were no vaccines, no treatments. So they crammed a bunch of people together in a conference room or, whatever, hotel ballroom to do their little seminar. And they're talking about, see, at least we were sane. Like, you're lucky you guys are fucking alive. How many of your audience died because they went?
Yeah, that would be curious.
Yeah. So, but yeah, I just couldn't believe that they're laughing about it now. Ha ha ha. 1 million Americans are dead. Ho ho ho.
But you and I have gotten to talk about not only the idea that we've talked about around the student loan crisis. You appeared on our Borrowed Future documentary. We've looked at this labor thing through the student loan crisis. The idea that college is necessary to succeed is absolute bunk. Nothing wrong with college, but the idea that it's the only ticket to success is crazy. What that messaging has done to the trades and how it's killed them, that there's just this backlog of need in the trades now, and you're a champion of that and have done such a good job with it. We've talked about that. You and I have been on the air talking about your work ethic scholarship and the.
So I want to get into that. So that's he summed up sort of the end game proposition there, which is, look, we have a labor crisis. People aren't working, right? The problem is that people are going to college. And that's what's getting them in the debt, and then they don't work and they don't care and blah, 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 right? That's their hypothesis on this, right? And what the real answer is you don't go to college and you get some trade job, right? And that somehow more people are going to work. And that's going to fix the economy, right? What they're missing, though, is the vast majority of trade jobs anymore require some college. And we've gone through this before. 75% of all new jobs being created require college, require a bachelor's degree or more. And I remember Mike Rowe, they did the Borrowed Futures documentary, and Mike Rowe was talking about, well, why would you go to college when you could just be a plumber and make $100,000 a year? And I went and looked it up, and you can make $100,000 a year as a plumber on average, but it requires a bachelor's degree. So what they're talking about is bullshit. So that's not a solution here. And then Mike's going to go into this sort of what he thinks the problem is, right? But their solution is essentially don't go to school and get a skill and somehow get a trade job. But I don't know how do you get a skill to do it if you don't have schooling? Right? That's what I don't get.
Well,
Unless you get an apprenticeship, but how many people get those?
Right. I was, sort of thinking, I guess they're maybe thinking about college in the most proper sense.
No, they're thinking
when they're saying this, but I don't know. When I stop and I consider the programs people in a lot of the trades have to go through, whether you call it college or not, like it really kind of is. Like there's this coursework sort of situation, which is basically what college is. Sometimes they're literally through colleges, and sometimes they're through their own sort of trade school, but hence the word school with trade school.
Well, right. But a lot of the trade schools are community colleges.
Right.
Which is a college. It just doesn't offer a 4-year degree. They offer associate's degrees. But it's still college. That's why I think freaking community college should be free. Period. I think 4-year schools should be free too, but public schools. But community colleges absolutely should be free. Everybody should be able to get an associate's degree for free. But that's just that's my minimum. I think in general you should be able to get a 4-year degree for free. But yeah, but here's Mike Rowe, and he's going to go off a little. I skipped ahead a little bit, but he's going to go off a little bit on his thing about it. But he's once again, they're kind of, it's a backwards way of thinking on this.
A vice, and almost vice versa in some ways. Work ethic, for instance, is officially a bad word in a lot of corporate handbooks now. Ambition, drive, delayed gratification, all the stuff that used to be baked into the basic Boy Scout oath has become, what's the word? Problematic, right? And so
So here's he sums it up so well there. That's their philosophy, though. That's driving this, and it's a conservative philosophy, and it's not based on facts or data. It's based on their opinion of the world, and their opinion of the world. If you don't want to work, it's because you're lazy and you don't believe in effort or good morals, or those things are problematic, right? And as you can see, they're not in employee handbooks anymore. They don't put those in handbooks, right? Well, I looked that up because that seemed like bullshit to me, as somebody who owns a business and hired people, right, who's gone through other people's employees' handbooks. Usually you're not even talking about that shit in the employee handbook. So let's look at what an employee handbook is. Here's an article from Forbes. I pulled this from my business files, actually, this article, because I did some research on it. So the employee handbook is one of the most important components of employment attorneys advise companies to have and update regularly. The reasons for this are simple. Employee handbooks not only formalize guidelines, expectations, and terms and conditions of employment, but more important, they can also help provide a layer of protection against employee claims and lawsuits. So the employment handbook is not there as a motivational tool. It's there to cover my ass as an employer, right? Because I have it now written
that
down.
Makes sense. In it, you're also saying what people can do and can't do. What is dress code? What happens if you're not on time? I mean, things that seem sort of like really basic, dumb stuff. But these are the grounds to which you write people up. These are the grounds to which people, maybe not right off the cuff, get terminated, but eventually can get terminated when they have too many write-ups.
Right.
So yeah, there's a reason that it's all in there.
Well, right, because people forget shit like this. So, like, let's say I fire an employee, right, and they go out to unemployment. Okay, unemployment is going to take whatever their claim is, and they're going to send it to me and go, well, hey, this person claimed that you fired them without cause, right, without a good reason, right? I'm going to have to sit there and go, well, no, I had a good reason. Well, what was that? Well, I caught them sleeping on the job or something, right? And they'll be like, okay, did you give them a warning? No, I just fired them. Okay, well, you have to give them a warning or something, or write them up, right? You have to show that there was an opportunity, right? But that's why you have an employee handbook. Sit there and go, hey, you get 1 verbal and 2 written, and then you're out.
Right.
But then I can show them, look, I did. I gave them the 1 verbal, and I noted it, and then I gave them 2 written for the same thing, and then I fired them, and it says in our employee handbook that I could do that. Then unemployment's going to side with me and say, no, you were rightfully terminated. If they decide to side with the employee, then guess who's paying their unemployment insurance?
Ding, ding, ding.
The employer. So that's how that works. But that's how, I mean, so when we're talking about this, he's talking about it, well, work ethic and drive and all that, then responsibility and, you know, and all that crap. Why would that be in the employee handbook? It normally wouldn't. These are the things you'd normally find in an employee handbook: compensation and benefits, vacation, sick, paid leave, dress code, workplace safety, non-disclosure agreements, conflicts of interest, internet usage, how to file, report workplace complaints, equal employment, disability, anti-discrimination policies, worker compensation policies. Where in that list would I be putting in drive and motivation and work ethic and da-da-da? I wouldn't, right?
Mm-mm.
So once again, Mike Rowe is full of shit. He's lying to you. They did not decide to take those out of employee manuals. Nobody thinks to put them in, right? Because how do I define, well, if you show this amount of drive, then you'll get a bonus. That's not defined.
You can't measure that.
No.
Therefore, you're literally signing yourself up to get sued because people are like,
Because I'm being vague.
you can't quantify that.
Right. That's what he doesn't understand. It's a legal document. It's not, it's setting policy. It's a legal document to cover my ass. Right? That I disclose to the employee, this is what the expectations are. But effort and work ethic, those are not well defined. Why would I start putting poorly defined things in there? You know, what's essentially a legal document. So once again, he's just full of shit. And they're both full of shit and they're laughing about it. But in their minds, this problem is the individual's not trying hard enough. And the beauty of that philosophy is then there's no problem that we can ever fix. Except for we just have to we just have to whip the slaves more. Because they don't want to work hard enough. I mean, what else are you going to do? Right? So there's no solution to the problem except for this generation sucks. That's all they can say. And that's all they're going to keep saying. And they're getting this from this guy, Eberstadt, who's a conservative economist, and he's kind of an idiot. But we're not going to go too much into him. But I want to play a little bit more of this real quick, just so they can...
Politically incorrect, yeah.
Well, I mean, listen, that guy you just talked to, Anthony, right? I mean, he's got questions. Those questions are always relevant, and you're great at answering them on on a micro level, right? Like, what do you do from a leadership standpoint? How can you help train your people?
Yeah.
But what you and I are talking about now is what happens when that guy, Anthony, he's still got to run his business, but the pool from which he can recruit went from this big to something about a third of the size.
Yeah.
We got 7.2 million able-bodied men in prime working age sitting out the workforce. That's never happened in peacetime.
By sitting out, we mean they are not counted in the unemployment statistics because they're not trying to get a job.
That's right.
That's the Nick Eberstadt number, right?
Okay, so that's their big concern, is all these guys not working, right? And we've covered this before. All right, here's what happens. And I'll sum it up a little bit real quick. So, hang on.
Get cable-free live TV with no hidden fees or...
Hey, cable-free live TV.
There you go. Okay. So this phenomenon has been going on since 1953. In 1953, we were at peak employment. And it's slowly gone down since then, but more and more men are not working or looking for jobs. What they didn't do in their video, if you notice, is they didn't say, well, what kind of people these are. They didn't identify them, right? They're just men, right? But what they did do is they implied what kind of people they are. They're undriven, lazy, effortless, PC kind of guys, right? When that's not the case. And in fact, the Obama administration, when he was president, he spent a ton of money on economists trying to solve this problem about why so many of these men aren't working. This has been going on for 70 years. This has been increasing. So to sit there and say it's a new thing or act like it's a new thing is total horseshit. This is a 70-year-long problem. And Obama spent a ton of money studying it. And I just want to look at this article real quick on why so many men aged 25 to 54 aren't working. But I want to look at this video here. Okay.
Hi, I'm David Wessel.
So this is, I'm just going to skip here.
If you look over the last several...
So this guy on the left is the interviewer. The guy on the right was one of the economists that worked on this for Obama for years. And he's going to explain what's going on, why so many of these men aren't working.
...decades, what has happened to the fraction of prime-age men who are working or looking for work?
The fraction of prime-age men who are working or looking for work has fallen continuously since the 1950s. In the early 1950s, 98% of men in that age bracket had a job. Most of them had a job, or the ones that didn't were actively looking for one. Today, that fraction has fallen down to 88%, and that process pretty much took place over about a half century.
So if you look at all the men between these eight in this prime age group, 12% of them aren't even looking for work.
That's right. They have, given up looking for work, and for most of them, when we look at them, they didn't have a job the year before and weren't looking for work the year before either. This isn't just I'll take a month off from searching for a job. This seems to be, for the bulk of these men, a real long-run state for them.
So people always wonder when I talk about prime age men, well, what about?
So I wanted to just cover that. So he's nailing down what the problem is here. It's grown over the years, but it's been many, many years. It's been decades and decades. The other thing,
right? It's not just an all of a sudden thing.
Right.
This didn't just happen since the pandemic, or it didn't just happen since the crash of 2008 and it never came back, or it's not that situation, not any of those situations.
No,
which it sounds almost when Rowe and Ramsey are discussing, they're kind of making it seem like it's an all of a sudden thing, or maybe it's since 2008 and people have just stayed out, or since the pandemic and people have stayed out,
or they got lazy or something but it has to be that way for them. He's got some, if you guys get a chance, you should watch that whole video and I'll link it, but where he talks about this. But First question is let's identify who they are. Okay? Right? If you're on a statistical thing where we're looking at, well, what's the actual problem? So it's not just, I mean, it's men, but what type of men? Let's try to narrow it down, right? Well, here we go. In the article, and this is the same article for this. Who are these men? They're disproportionately low-income men who either dropped out of high school or didn't go beyond a high school diploma. They're not spending any more time on childcare, not spending any more time on chores. They're spending a lot more time watching TV than men who are in the labor force, right? So why are there so many since the economy bounced back? Surely some of these guys don't want to work or are getting by on their wives' incomes. But Furman, who's the economist there, says less than a quarter of the men who aren't in the workforce have a working wife, and this fraction has been decreasing for 50 years. It turns out not having a job or looking for one isn't a great way to find a wife. That makes sense. I mean, who wants to marry somebody who's a sponge, right? Some of these men are getting by on government benefits such as Social Security, disability, but the increasing these men on disability isn't nearly large enough to account for the growth in the ranks of men not at work. So it's not like these guys are getting handouts. A lot of these guys are just flat broke. The big reason men aren't working or looking for work is because they've realized that employers aren't interested in hiring workers with few skills or little education. So they've given up. So here we have, they're using Eberstadt, who's a Mike Rowe and Dave Ramsey. Eberstadt's a conservative economist. Eberstadt doesn't address the education issue at all. He doesn't even note that these men are high school or less. Doesn't note it in any of his research because he works for a conservative think tank. He doesn't have to prove anything, right? He's just going to be accepted. But
right.
But the bottom line is this guy Furman, he's actually working for the government trying to solve this problem. And what is the solution? We need to get these guys skills. We need to get them education. If they have those, now they're competitive in the workforce. But they don't have those. So Obama pushed for all these with just, re-education programs or education programs to get people to, especially a lot of these guys live in the South. They live in rural communities where there's not a lot of work anyway, to get them to move to places where there are jobs, to get them free education.
Yeah, see, that's another thing I'm remembering back to a point in time where my father was unhappy with his employer.
Mm-hmm.
Now, my late father that I'm speaking of did not even have a high school education, but he had grown into a management position with his company, and so he had good benefits and a good salary, etc. And now he did not quit his job and stay unemployed, so I'm not trying to paint that picture.
No.
But essentially, his lack of education made it impossible for him to go elsewhere. He became unhappy with his employer, and he kind of went looking about, and he was in a small community. Mm-hmm. He went looking about, and he was like, what are my other options here? And trying to figure out what his other options were, and he was like, any of my other options are going to pay me almost nothing, like not a surviving sort of wage. There's no point in doing that. And so he stayed where he was at. He didn't become unemployed. But my point being, what I'm seeing as being the situation, if some of these guys had never grown themselves into these higher level management positions where they have these good wages, when they look around and see what their options are.
Well, a lot of these guys grew up in an era where you couldn't just get that job out of high school.
Right.
So they're stuck.
Couldn't necessarily grow themselves up. But even looking around and seeing what few options that they actually have, and if they're in smaller communities, there might be, a handful of options that don't pay very well that are already jobs that are scooped up by people.
Mm-hmm.
Even though they don't pay very well, there's compounding factors here.
Well, right, but here's the joke on the whole thing, right? On the one side, you have Dave Ramsey and Mike Rowe, and their thing is, well, these people are kind of just lazy. They don't want to work. Effort's a bad thing. It's a cultural issue. There's not much we can do other than, force cultural things onto our kids that they have to be this way or that way, yada, yada, yada. And it's a culture war that they're fighting, as opposed to looking at it like an actual economic financial problem. Because an economic financial problem is simply that, well, let's survey these guys and let's figure out what's going on. Why aren't you looking for work? Because nobody's hiring somebody like me because I don't have the skills. Oh, well, what if you had the skills? Would you be looking for work? Probably, because I could probably get a decent job paying decent money. Well, what if we just got them the skills? What if we put them through school, spent the money? But these guys aren't. These guys are against student loan forgiveness. These guys are against free college. No. These guys don't want you to go to college. They think going to college is a bad idea. That it's a waste of time and money.
Okay, in all fairness, they didn't say that it was a waste of time and money, but they did say that it's not for everybody.
They do say it's a waste of time and money a lot. You watch the borrowed futures thing. They're basically, they say college is good if you can pay for it, but you shouldn't be able to borrow money to go to school. But basically they're saying we don't want poor people going to school. Or, in fact, if you watch that video, they tell all the minority kids not to go to college. But the one white kid, they're all for. I'm not saying it's racist. I'm just saying watch it and tell me it isn't. Anyway, so I did a breakdown of it. It's really terrible. But that's the whole gag with this is I just think it's a joke. Right? Because they don't seem to talk about the problem or look at the issue of the problem. It's just these people are lazy or it's a cultural issue. But it can't be a cultural issue if it's 70 years old.
Yeah. Again, I'm gonna say this is where I have a different opinion than Duncan about what the Ramsey people believe. I think they're fine with college. I think they're completely out of touch with their ideas that everyone can just magically work their way through college and not borrow. I think that's out of touch, but I don't think they're against people going per se.
I think they're against people borrowing money to go to school, which is what 90+% of people have to do anyway. I mean, if you take that away, then basically you're saying only the rich kids get to go to school.
Right.
Unless you're saying we're going to pay for school and make it free or make it cheap, like it was when Dave Ramsey went to school. He paid $362 a year to go to school.
In all fairness, I do think people borrow entirely more than they need to. They borrow like extra cushions worth of money frequently. I've kind of run into that too, which isn't necessarily a great idea. But to say people shouldn't be able to borrow any at all is
well, you're basically you're cutting poor people out of school, which is mostly you're cutting minorities out.
Right.
Which is what they want. They're all for that.
I mean, it's a pretty blind sort of like you've got your blinders on. Like you have so much privilege, you have these blinders to anybody that doesn't have that sort of privilege.
Absolutely.
Everybody can just magically
pay for it somehow. Yeah, which is not is not the issue.
Exactly. And I don't even think they realize that they have total blinders on there because they're so blind about it. They're so blind about it, they literally can't even see.
Right.
That they can't see.
Right. So, anyway, if we take a quick break right here, how long have we? We have one more Dave Ramsey video, and this is still continuing the similar topic, but the labor force in general, right? So right now there's a shortage of people in the labor force. That group was part of it, but there's other bigger factors going in. But let's see what Dave has to say because it's probably brilliant and we just don't realize it. Are you ready for some genius to be thrown at you?
Oh man, I don't know. It's kind of late in the day for me to experience true genius. We'll see if I can handle it.
All right, let's see.
This in from the U.S. Chamber of Commerce, quotes from them about America's labor shortage. We hear every day from our member companies of every size and industry across nearly every state that they're facing unprecedented challenges trying to find enough workers to fill open jobs. Right now, the latest data shows that we have over 10 million job openings in the U.S. and 5.7 million unemployed workers.
That's all true.
Which would, by definition, folks, mean that we have a negative unemployment rate. And yet we still show positive unemployment. We still show unemployment being in the 3 to 5% range, which economists have long called full employment, by the way. But it also it illustrates what Nick Eberstadt says in his book. He's a Harvard and London School of Economics economist who has done a bunch of studies on this data. And one of the things he discovered is that our current measure of unemployment is antiquated and inaccurate. Because obviously, if we have 10 million job openings and only 5.7 million unemployed workers, we would have zero unemployment. Obviously, it would be a negative unemployment.
It's not how unemployment works. Right. I agree that the unemployment number needs to be updated quite a bit. Most economists agree on that.
I agree with that as well because it's misleading. It's very misleading.
Right.
The data sort of makes you believe a certain thing because numerically they're kind of representing it that way, but they sort of it's like, you know, when you fail to read the fine print on something and then you realize what you really signed up for, you know, on the cell phone plan or whatever. There's all this sort of fine print that goes with that we don't even have the opportunity to read.
Yeah, so unemployment is basically people who aren't employed who are looking for jobs. Right? That's how they count those people. And that's the total of the workforce. Now,
so Duncan, let's clarify here. So if I stopped looking for work or if I am underemployed, do I get counted in that number?
No.
By underemployed, I mean, if I work 5 hours a week, it's not enough to pay any of my bills, but I'm employed.
Right. But you don't count in that number. It's just people that aren't employed who are looking for work. Right. That's how the unemployment number is counted. So when he's talking about the number, he doesn't. I can't even remember where we were at.
Okay, so we were clarifying how this number is misleading.
Because
if you're way underemployed or for some reason not looking, you don't even count in the numbers. So the number can look different than kind of the real reality.
Right. So the thing is it's just people who are not working, looking for work. So traditionally unemployment, you're looking to keep it around 2.5 to 3.5%, something like that. Right. In traditional economics, that would be considered full employment. This idea that you'd have 0% unemployment used to be, well, the thought was it would be devastating to the economy because there wouldn't be enough jobs for people coming up. Right. That's starting to change because of how the economy works is changed quite a bit because we're international now. Right. People do work in different countries. We get people coming from different countries. So it's a much bigger playing field now. So this idea of 0% unemployment isn't necessarily a bad idea anymore, of unemployment at least, or 100% unemployment. But we have to look at things like you said, like who's underemployed, because that's still a problem. Who's just simply not looking for work, right? And how do we get them to start being able to contribute, right, and making money? So there are other factors in there, but yeah. So that's the thing. The thing he doesn't understand is I have 10 million open jobs, but I've got 5 million people who are unemployed, right? They're not working, but looking for work. That doesn't mean my unemployment is 0. It means my unemployment is that number, that 5 million divided by the total people working, right? Looking for work and working. The fact that I have 10 million open jobs doesn't mean anything to the unemployment number. So he doesn't understand the number because he's sitting there, well, that should be 0. Well, no, the economists are correct. I don't know why he thinks they're wrong or why the Chamber of Commerce effed this up because they clearly didn't. But we'll let him keep going because he's going to mess this whole thing up like usual.
We have a shortage of workers. We have a lot of jobs, but not enough workers to fill them. The chamber says if every unemployed person in the country found a job, there'd still be 4 million open jobs. What we were just saying. Overall, in 2022, employers ended up adding an unprecedented 4.5 million jobs, but at the same time, millions of Americans have been leaving the labor force.
Mm-hmm. It's true.
In fact, we have nearly 3 million fewer Americans participating in the labor force today compared to February of 2020.
That's true.
Which begs the question, what the hell are they doing?
Well, that is a good question. What is going on, Lace? Why are these people leaving the workforce? Why aren't they working? I wonder if we read the entire article from the Chamber of Commerce that he's holding in his hand, it might explain that. It would seem the Chamber of Commerce would have an explanation to that.
Or at least be interested in trying to figure it out.
Well, the question of why. Why are you not a complete study? You didn't do the whole assignment. If you didn't give me the answer why, if you just came into my office and said, hey, we got a problem with X, and I'm like, well, why? I don't know. Like, well, go freaking find out, man. What good are you?
Why are we writing a whole thing to say, by the way, there's a problem and that's it?
All right. He didn't offer a solution or what the problem is. So let's look. Understanding America's labor shortage. So he read the first part, blah, blah, blah. But he stops before this. How did this happen? Wow, there's even a big title and everything. Look at that. How did this happen? He's asking the question, and it says right here, at the height of the pandemic, more than 120,000 businesses temporarily closed, and more than 30 million U.S. workers were unemployed. Yeah, because it was a pandemic. Since then, job openings have steadily increased since January 2020. So yeah, there have been more jobs since January 2020, while unemployment has slowly declined. Overall, in 2022, employers ended up adding an unprecedented 4.5 million jobs, but at the same time, millions of Americans have been leaving the labor force since before the pandemic. In fact, we have nearly 3 million fewer Americans participating in the labor force today compared to February 2020. Right? He read that. So understanding the gap, right? The participation rate is down. As you can see, like, I don't know if you can see this graph real well. Let's see if I can. Come on. I always do this. I always suck at this part. Anyway. But as you can see, I don't know. Can you see this well, or is it too small?
It's okay.
Okay. But you can see it peaks here. Unemployment. Right? The labor force participation, it was peaked at 63.3. Then it dropped to 60.2. And now people are still coming back. Right? It's gone up. It's just not to where it was 3 years ago. That's all they're saying. Right? So it's down by about 0.8%. So right now, labor force is 62.6, down from 63.4 in February. It's clear that able workers are being overlooked or sitting on the sidelines, right? So there's two things. They're just not getting jobs, or they're just not looking for jobs. But there's not just one reason that workers are sitting out, but several factors have come together to cause the ongoing shortage, right? And so they went through factors contributing to the labor shortage. People had an increase of savings due to unemployment benefits, stimulus checks, and people weren't spending money during lockdowns or during the pandemic because they were at home. But that's all pretty much gone now because inflation has bled that away. So they talk about that here. High inflation is driving down savings accounts. So that excuse is kind of going away, or has gone away for the most part. The other problem was early retirement spiked. Now, I don't know about you, but I had a bunch of clients that retired back in right before the pandemic was really bad. Right?
Right.
Because they didn't want to be out there in the workforce. They're old. They could die. Right? Their lives are more important. Yeah.
Never mind. I'm just going to peace out early. I was going to do it in a few years, but I'll just do it.
Yeah. Now. I'll live on less. Child care has become a big problem.
And I'll live.
Yeah. Child care has become a big problem. A lot of people are staying home with their kids because it's too expensive. Right? And then people started new businesses, and then there's the great reshuffle where people were sitting there going, well, I don't really like my job, so I'm going to get something else. But there are lots and lots and lots of factors here, right? You can't just nail it down to one thing. I mean, it's lots and lots of things, and that's even not a comprehensive list. So we have that answer. What's the answer? The answer is lots of different reasons. Some people retired early. Some people had some extra savings. Some people are just childcare is too expensive. They can't afford to go back to work. Some people are looking for different types of jobs. Some people are starting new businesses. Lots and lots of stuff, right? Some people just don't have the skills, or they're just overlooked by the labor force, which we talked about in the previous video. You know, so there's lots and lots of things going on. But notice how Dave does not read the rest of this article. That's the common theme with them, is they don't read. They only read the parts they like, and then they skip the rest of the article. Let's see. Come on, Dave.
These are adults. How do they eat if they're not working? Who's feeding these people? Well, think about it for a second. It'll come to you. You are.
That's actually not true. It's actually not true. A lot of these people, like we said with the last video, they're just living on less, and they're broke. They're not getting a lot of government benefits. Not the way he's touting it.
Right.
I mean, a lot of those benefits are gone. They ended last year. So, not anymore. But once again, it's the poor person's fault, right? It's got to be an individual responsibility only.
Their mama is feeding them. They live in their mother's basement.
Nope.
And in the greatest turn of irony I've ever heard, spend their days playing Call of Duty. Think about the irony of that. It'll come to you. This is what we're going to be talking about with Mike Rowe on May 4th, are these types of things. We've got, according to Eberstat, we've got 7.2 million.
Okay, and see, now it's got to go back to the 7.2 million men, which are not the whole of this image. And even those guys, we figured out, their problem is they don't have education. If they did, they'd be probably working.
Well, and you also pointed out that many of them live in smaller rural communities, which, you know, frequently have less employment opportunities and funneled into maybe just a handful of sort of industries and business sectors.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah, and they're probably doing an odd job here or there under the table, and that's how they're getting by, and that's it.
Right.
You know? But that's the thing that they're missing from this whole big picture. You want these people to start working, you got to give them some reason, some incentive. And right now, if it's like I can't get a good job, I just get overlooked for every job, right? Or minimum wage in my town is $7.25 an hour.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, it's hard. It's hard to be motivated to want to do anything. So I don't know. I think the whole thing is it's once you said maybe it is just they're overprivileged, they don't see it. But I think that's the problem is the mentality is that if you're not rich or you're not doing well, it's because you're just lazy or worthless or something like that, as opposed to you just don't have the advantages to get ahead, which seemed to be what the actual economist working for Obama, not this guy Eberstat who's just writing books for a conservative think tank, but an actual economist presenting government reports is sitting there going, no, the problem is these guys aren't educated. We need to get into a position where we have a workforce that's more educated that can do these jobs. And we just haven't put any money into that. And what's their solution? You should only be allowed to go to college if you can afford it out of your own pocket, which would cut 90% of people out of higher ed. Any sort of higher ed, trade school otherwise. So it's just a stupid conclusion with no backing. They're just making shit up. So that's that's my whole spiel on that. Did you have anything you wanted to add or no?
No, I think that kind of covers it. Like, this is the topic we've delved into before. It's just amazing that it's still.
Yeah, it's the Worthington's Law thing. It comes back to bite us every single time.
Yeah.
Yeah. And maybe we'll do another episode where we joke around about Worthington's Law. And
Yeah, because apparently it just keeps coming up anyway. We might as well.
Yeah, might as well. Well, anyway, where can everybody catch you, Lacey?
All right. Well, you can catch me at mysense.com for information about course offerings, workshops, and articles written by myself. You can write in if you want further information about any of that. Or if you want to send us any links, if you want to hop on here with us and maybe, you disagreed with us about something and want to take that on. Or send us some topic requests and clips you want to see us talk about. Where can they do that?
You can do it at our email, gossipfinancead@outlook.com. Sorry. But yeah, thanks for everybody for joining us. And yeah, I will catch you next time.